On a stormy night near St. Louis, a truck driver pulled into a quiet stop. But what he found there was anything but ordinary. What if the road you drive isn't really yours anymore? Stay with us because this story will keep you looking over your shoulder the next time you stop on the highway.
Chapter 1. The Long Haul into St. Louis. The wipers thrashed back and forth across the windshield of Victor's 2021 Peterbilt, but they could barely keep up with the sheets of rain pouring down. It wasn't just a drizzle. It was the kind of Midwest summer storm that turned highways into rivers and tested the patience of every driver out there. Headlights blurred against the wet glass, and each flash of lightning lit up the sky like a war zone. Victor leaned forward in his seat, shoulders stiff, his right hand gripping the wheel tighter than usual. He'd been on the road since before dawn, and now, 14 hours later, his back ached and his eyes burned. But there was no pulling over on I-70 just yet. Not in this weather. He knew Missouri roads too well to trust them during a storm. Hydroplaning, reckless cars cutting off big rigs, and deer darting out of nowhere. It all came with the territory. The hum of his Peterbilt's diesel engine was usually a comfort, a steady companion across thousands of miles of asphalt. Tonight, though, the sound seemed drowned out by the relentless pounding of rain on the roof and hood. He checked his mirrors, both sides glistening with water, and watched the reflection of red taillights stretching endlessly into the dark. Victor thought about home. Daniela would be putting Jessie to bed right about now, probably reading her that worn-out storybook Jessie always begged for. David, at 15, was likely glued to his video games, pretending not to hear his mom asking for help with the dishes. And the dog, Buddy, would be sprawled across the living room rug, ears twitching every time thunder cracked. The thought of his family gave him warmth, but also a pang of guilt. 3 weeks on the road meant missing soccer games, bedtime prayers, and family dinners. This life paid the bills, sure, but it came with sacrifices no one outside the trucking world could ever understand. As he passed the first green highway sign announcing St. Louis, 20 miles, Victor adjusted in his seat. He knew this stretch of road carried its own reputation. The closer you got to the city, the rougher the traffic. He remembered the headlines. St. Louis was one of the most dangerous cities in America, plagued with crime rates higher than Chicago, higher than Detroit. Shootings, robberies, carjackings, they weren't just statistics. Truckers swapped real stories over CB radios about loads being stolen right off trailers, and drivers being robbed at gunpoint while fueling up. He reached for the CB mic hanging above him, clicking it once, just to listen. A couple of voices crackled through. "Storm's hitting hard on 70, boys. Visibility's down to nothing out here. Copy that. Saw a four-wheeler spin out near exit 210. Y'all keep it tight." Victor let the chatter fade. Sometimes the CB was a lifeline. Other times it was just more noise reminding him of how dangerous the road really was. Another flash of lightning cut across the horizon, and for a split second, Victor caught a glimpse of the Gateway Arch, its silver curve glowing against the storm. It looked haunting in the rain, like a giant blade slicing through the night sky. He'd seen it 100 times, but tonight it carried a different weight. The storm, the city, the exhaustion, it all pressed down on him like an omen. He shifted gears, downshifting slightly as traffic slowed. Semi-trucks loomed around him, their taillights smeared across the wet highway. The smell of wet asphalt and diesel exhaust filled the cabin, mixing with the faint trace of black coffee he'd been nursing for hours. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. A greasy diner burger would have to wait. Right now, he just needed to find a safe place to park for the night. Up ahead, a glowing sign cut through the rain. Pilot Travel Center, 2 miles. Truckers knew this spot. It was one of the busiest truck stops outside St. Louis, a place where hundreds of rigs pulled in every night. Showers, hot food, diesel, and a massive lot that stretched wider than some small towns. It was a haven for drivers. At least, that's what it was supposed to be. Victor felt a flicker of relief. The storm had drained him, and the promise of a hot cup of coffee and a quiet cab to sleep in sounded like heaven. But at the same time, his gut twisted. Truck stops at night could be unpredictable. Between the crime in St. Louis and the stories he'd heard, drivers approached by strangers, shady deals in the back lots, even rumors of people vanishing, he knew to stay alert. As the exit ramp approached, Victor signaled and eased the Peterbilt off the interstate. The wet tires hissed against the asphalt, and the rain beat harder against the cab. The lights of the truck stop grew brighter, neon blues and reds shimmering through the storm like a mirage. He whispered under his breath, a habit he picked up years ago whenever he felt uneasy. Just one night, in and out. Keep your head down. The road had taught Victor many lessons, but one stood out above the rest. Sometimes the most dangerous part of the journey wasn't the miles behind you. It was the stop you thought would give you rest. And with that thought, he rolled under the glowing canopy of the truck stop, windshield streaked with rain, unaware that this night would change everything. Chapter 2. The Truck Stop Haven. Victor eased the Peterbilt beneath the tall canopy, the hiss of air brakes filling the night as he slowed to a stop near the diesel pumps. Rain pelted the roof in steady rhythm, echoing like 1,000 drums. Neon signs flickered across puddles in the lot, casting distorted shapes that danced with each ripple of water. The storm hadn't let up, but under the fluorescent lights of the Pilot Travel Center there was a false sense of safety, like stepping into a bubble separate from the chaos of the road. Dozens of trucks idled around him, engines humming in low, steady rumbles. Some rigs were polished chrome, glistening even in the rain. Others looked beaten down, covered in rust, dents, and grime. Machines that had seen too many miles. Victor could read the story of each driver just by looking at their truck. He'd learned that skill over 5 years of long hauls. The clean cab meant a driver with pride. The cluttered dash filled with fast food wrappers usually meant a man chasing miles without rest. The smell hit him as soon as he cracked his window. A mix of diesel exhaust, wet pavement, and fried food drifting from the diner inside. He thought of Daniela's home cooking, feijoada, arroz, beans simmering in garlic and onion, and sighed. Truck stop food was survival, not comfort. Victor fueled up quickly, water dripping from his jacket as he pulled the hose back into place. A couple of other drivers nodded at him in passing. One was a young guy in a hoodie, face buried in his phone, barely acknowledging his surroundings. The other was an older man with a long white beard, cigarette dangling from his lips as he shuffled toward the entrance. Both looked exhausted. All truckers did at this hour. He locked up the Peterbilt and stepped into the diner section of the stop. The blast of warm air smelled like burnt coffee and fried chicken. Greasy tiles squeaked under his boots as he crossed to a booth near the window. He set his hat down on the table and rubbed his temples, feeling the fatigue creep in heavy now that he was off the road. The diner was half full. A few truckers sat hunched over plates of food, eyes glued to their phones or the muted TV above the counter that played the local news. A waitress in her late 40s moved between tables, her name tag reading Connie, her tired smile practiced but kind. The storm raged outside, lightning flashing through the glass, but in here it felt almost calm. Almost. Victor noticed him right away. At the far end of the diner, a man sat alone in a corner booth. He wore a dark jacket with the hood pulled low, hands wrapped around a coffee mug he hadn't touched in some time. His eyes, though, that's what unsettled Victor. The stranger wasn't scrolling through a phone or watching the TV. He was watching him. Victor tried to ignore it, telling himself he was just imagining things, but every time he glanced up, the man's gaze was still fixed on him. Not hostile, not friendly, just steady, like someone studying a map or measuring a distance. Connie appeared at his table, breaking the tension. "What'll it be tonight, hun?" she asked, pulling a small notepad from her apron. Victor forced a smile. "Just coffee for now. Black. Maybe a slice of pie if you've got something fresh." "Apple just came out of the oven," she said, scribbling quickly. "I'll bring you a big slice. You look like you've been through hell on that highway." Victor chuckled softly. "Storm's a bad one." As Connie walked away, Victor glanced toward the corner again. The hooded man was still staring. When he realized Victor had caught him, he slowly turned his attention toward the window, as if nothing had happened. Victor shifted uncomfortably in his seat, pulling out his phone. He scrolled through a couple of text messages from Daniela, pictures of Jessie in her pajamas, Buddy curled up on the couch, David reluctantly smiling for a quick selfie. They calmed him, grounding him in something real and safe. Still, that feeling of being watched gnawed at him. The coffee arrived, steaming in a chipped mug. The first sip burned his tongue but revived his senses. He cut into the warm apple pie, the sweetness sharp against the bitterness of the coffee. For a brief moment, he let himself enjoy the small ritual, pretending the storm outside didn't exist, pretending the stranger in the corner wasn't there, but pretending only worked for so long. The front doors banged open as two more truckers rushed in, shaking rain from their jackets. The noise startled Victor, and when his eyes flicked back to the corner booth, the man was gone. The coffee mug still sat there, untouched, but the seat was empty. No sound of footsteps leaving, no door slamming shut. Victor's pulse quickened. He scanned the diner, the counter, the restrooms at the back. Nothing. The man had vanished as silently as he appeared. Connie returned to top off his coffee. "You okay, hun? You look like you've seen a ghost." Victor forced a laugh, shaking his head. "Just tired. Long day." But inside, he knew this was different. He'd been on the road long enough to trust his instincts, and tonight every nerve in his body screamed the same thing. Something about this truck stop wasn't right. And as he finished his pie, staring out into the rain-slicked lot, Victor realized rest wouldn't come easy tonight, because sometimes the danger didn't wait for you out on the highway. Sometimes it sat across from you in a quiet diner, watching. Chapter 3. Stranger in the Diner. Victor pushed the empty coffee mug away, his nerves buzzing like live wires. The storm outside had eased slightly, but rain still trickled down the glass in uneven streaks, bending the neon lights into warped shapes. He glanced again toward the corner booth, half expecting the man to be back in his seat. But the space was empty, the coffee mug still sitting there, cooling. He leaned back, scanning the diner. Everything seemed normal at first glance. A pair of drivers chatting quietly over burgers, a young couple in hoodies glued to their phones, Connie sliding plates across the counter. But something gnawed at Victor. In all his years on the road, he'd learned that danger often came disguised as ordinary moments. The door jingled and Victor's eyes shot toward it. A group of 3 men in rain-soaked jackets entered, laughing too loudly, the kind of laugh that carried more edge than joy. They took a table near the entrance, tossing their wet caps onto the vinyl bench. Victor noted them. Always note groups, his gut reminded him. Lone men could be desperate, but groups? They were unpredictable. He shifted his gaze toward the parking lot outside the big diner window. The storm had left a sheet of water across the asphalt, mirrors of trucks and semis glowing in the light. That's when he saw him again. The stranger. He stood at the far edge of the lot, half hidden behind a row of parked rigs. The hood was still pulled low, shoulders hunched against the rain. Even from that distance, Victor could feel the weight of his stare. He wasn't moving, wasn't heading to a truck. He was just watching. Victor's pulse climbed. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, reminding himself to breathe slow. Paranoia could eat a man alive on the road. Maybe the guy was just another driver taking a smoke, lost in thought. But the longer Victor looked, the less it felt like coincidence. Connie appeared again, her pot of coffee in hand. "Another warm-up?" Victor covered the mug with his hand. "No thanks, I think I'm good." His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed him, flicking back toward the window. Connie followed his gaze, squinting out at the rain-smeared lot. "What is it?" Victor hesitated. "That guy, by the trucks. You see him?" She leaned closer, frowning, but shook her head. "Honey, I don't see anyone. You sure you're not just seeing shadows?" Victor turned back. The stranger was gone. Just an empty stretch of lot, puddles glowing under the sodium lights. His stomach sank. Either the man had moved, or Victor was starting to unravel from exhaustion. Neither option comforted him. He tried to ground himself, fiddling with his phone. A notification blinked. Daniela had sent another message. "Storm's heavy here too. Drive safe. Kids say they miss you." He typed a quick reply, something lighthearted. But as his thumb hovered over send, he caught movement in the reflection of the window. Not outside. Inside. The stranger was back. But this time he wasn't across the diner. He was at the counter. Hood still low, the man sat on a stool, hands folded neatly as if he'd been there the whole time. He didn't order anything, didn't speak, just sat. And even though his face was hidden in shadow, Victor knew those eyes were fixed on him. The laughter from the group at the entrance echoed too loudly. The clink of silverware scraped too sharply against plates. Every sound felt amplified, distorted, like the world was shifting slightly off balance. Victor swallowed hard, his throat dry despite the coffee. Finally, he made himself move. Sliding from the booth, he left a few crumpled bills on the table and pulled his jacket tight. His boots echoed across the diner floor as he headed for the door. He didn't look at the counter, didn't give the stranger the satisfaction of acknowledgement. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped out into the wet night. Rain soaked his shoulders instantly, cold and sharp against his skin. He walked briskly toward his Peterbilt, eyes darting across the rows of rigs. Every shadow seemed deeper, every figure blurred by water and distance. He climbed into the cab, locked the door behind him, and exhaled. Safe, or as safe as a man could be in a truck stop outside St. Louis, in the dead of night, with a storm still rumbling overhead. Victor started the engine, letting the vibration calm his nerves. He pulled the curtains around the sleeper cab and lay back, boots still on, phone clutched in his hand. But no matter how hard he tried to shut it out, one thought wouldn't leave him. That man wasn't just a shadow, and he wasn't done with him yet. Chapter 4. The Silent Lot. The rain had softened into a steady drizzle, the kind that coated everything in a thin layer of silver. Most drivers would have welcomed the break from the storm, but for Victor, it only made the night feel stranger. Without the pounding of heavy rain on the cab roof, the silence pressed in around him, a silence too deep for a truck stop that size. He lay back in his sleeper berth, boots still on, the hum of the Peterbilt's engine idling low. Normally, the vibration of the truck was like a lullaby, but tonight every sound stood out. The tick of cooling metal, the faint creak of his trailer shifting under the rain, and the occasional slam of a distant cab door as another driver settled in for the night. Victor rolled onto his side, pulling the curtain open just enough to peek through the glass. The lot spread wide under the harsh glow of floodlights. Hundreds of rigs were scattered across the asphalt, their reflections glimmering in black puddles. Diesel fumes hung heavy in the air, mixed with the faint smell of wet earth. But what struck him wasn't what he could see. It was what he couldn't. A place like this usually buzzed at night. Drivers walking to and from showers, the shuffle of boots across wet concrete, the distant laughter from guys swapping stories near the fuel island. But now, nothing. No footsteps, no voices, just the low mechanical growl of trucks idling in the dark. Victor's chest tightened. He told himself it was the fatigue, the long hours messing with his perception. Maybe everyone had already turned in. Maybe the storm had chased the usual crowd inside. But deep down, he knew better. Something about this lot wasn't right. He slid out of the berth and climbed into the driver's seat, wiping condensation from the windshield with the back of his hand. The glass was cold, the droplets running down like nervous sweat. He flicked on the defroster, the faint hiss filling the cab, and leaned closer. That's when he heard it. A muffled voice, low, sharp, coming from the far corner of the lot. He cracked his window, letting the damp night air rush in. The sound grew clearer now. 2 men, maybe 3, arguing in hushed but angry tones. The words were muffled by distance and the hiss of rain, but the cadence was unmistakable. Not friendly, not casual, heated. Victor squinted, eyes tracking the shadows near the dumpsters at the edge of the lot. His headlights didn't reach that far, but under the dim glow of a flickering floodlight, he caught faint movement. 2 silhouettes, squared off against a third. One of them shoved the man hard against the wall. The impact echoed across the lot, hollow and violent. Victor froze. He knew that posture, that desperate flailing. Whoever that man was, he wasn't part of them. He was cornered prey. Another shove. The man staggered sideways, slipping on the wet ground. One of the others stepped forward, something metallic flashing in his hand as the light flickered again. Victor's gut dropped. That wasn't just a fight. That was a knife. His breath caught in his throat. Every instinct screamed at him to look away, to shut the curtain and pretend he hadn't seen a thing. This was St. Louis, after all, a city where headlines of murder and robbery barely raised eyebrows anymore. Truckers whispered stories about loads disappearing, about drivers vanishing without a trace, and everyone knew the golden rule. Don't get involved if you want to keep breathing. But Victor couldn't move. His hands clutched the steering wheel even though the engine idled still. His mind raced with images of Daniela, of David, of little Jesse. What if this man had a family waiting too? What if tonight was the night they'd get a call they never wanted to receive? The voices rose. The victim tried to shout, but one of the men struck him across the face, silencing him. The metallic flash rose again, glinting under the floodlight, and Victor's chest went cold. He wasn't imagining it. He was watching a murder unfold, 10 trucks away from where he sat. He pulled his phone from the dash, hands trembling, thumb hovering over 911. But then, hesitation. If they saw his lights, if they realized someone was watching, what would stop them from turning on him next? A lone trucker in a lot full of hiding spots, in one of the most violent cities in America? Victor's heart pounded so hard it hurt. Every second dragged like an eternity as he sat there, frozen between duty and fear, watching shadows move in the rain. The silence of the lot was broken only by the faint, sickening sound of something heavy collapsing against the wet pavement. And in that moment, Victor knew sleep would not find him tonight. Chapter 5. A glimpse of trouble. Victor's palms were slick against the steering wheel, his breath fogging the glass as he stared into the shadows at the edge of the lot. His instincts screamed at him to look away, but his eyes were locked, drawn to the scene as though his life depended on it. The floodlight above the dumpsters flickered again, and in that brief strobe of illumination the picture sharpened. Two men dragging a third along the slick pavement, his body limp, his head lolling unnaturally. Even at a distance, Victor could see the glistening streak of something dark on the man's shirt. Blood. Victor's gut twisted. This wasn't a bar fight. This wasn't a scuffle between truckers. He had just witnessed violence escalate into something far worse. Something lethal. He swallowed hard and forced himself to glance away toward his side mirror. The rain-smeared glass reflected the lot in fractured fragments, the neon sign shimmering in the puddles, the silhouettes moving with deliberate haste. The mirror didn't lie. It confirmed everything his brain wanted to deny. One of the attackers bent down, rifling through the victim's pockets, pulling something out before tossing the man's body against the dumpster, like discarded trash. The other stood watch, shoulders tense, head swiveling side to side. They weren't panicked. They weren't rushing. This wasn't the clumsy mess of amateurs. It was cold, efficient. Victor's pulse hammered. He knew the code of the road. Truckers kept to themselves. You didn't pry into other people's business because sooner or later, trouble always circled back. But he couldn't shake the image of the man's head snapping back under the blow. The lifeless weight of his body dragged across the pavement. His phone was still in his hand, the screen glowing against the dark cab. 911 hovered on the keypad. He could press it. He could be the voice that called for help. But then another thought invaded, colder than the rain soaking the lot. What if they saw him? Victor shifted slightly, careful not to let his interior lights flick on. His Peterbilt was parked with a clear line of sight to the dumpsters. If either man glanced this way, they'd spot him immediately. A lone driver, awake in his cab, watching, witnessing. And in St. Louis, witnesses didn't walk away untouched. He thought of Daniela again, her laughter, her warm accent, the way she'd put her hand on his shoulder whenever he came home, grounding him like an anchor. He thought of David, stubborn and restless, just starting to chase independence. And Jessie, 5 years old, curls bouncing as she squealed, "Daddy!" whenever he stepped through the front door. His family needed him alive, not lying in some forgotten lot. Another statistic, in a city already drowning in crime. His chest heaved as he forced the phone down, screen darkening. Not yet, not here. He couldn't risk it. But even as he tried to convince himself, movement in the mirror froze him again. One of the men, the taller one, had straightened and was scanning the lot. His posture was deliberate, head turning slowly, scanning rows of trucks as if counting them. His eyes swept past Victor's row once, then again, lingering this time. Victor ducked instinctively, heart slamming against his ribs. He pressed himself against the seat, holding his breath as though silence could cloak him. He didn't dare move. The seconds stretched long, the sound of his own heartbeat drowning out the idling engine. Finally, through the corner of his eye, he saw the man turn back toward the dumpsters. A rough gesture, a nod, and the two of them began dragging the body deeper into the shadows, disappearing behind the row of trailers. Victor exhaled, shaky and shallow, gripping the wheel until his knuckles whitened. He'd just witnessed a killing. He knew it. The blood, the limp body, the calculated movements. It was undeniable. And now, he wasn't just a trucker trying to get some rest. He was a witness. A witness in a city where being one could cost you everything. Chapter 6. Conflicted on the road. Victor didn't move for a long time after the shadows swallowed the two men and their victim. The lot seemed to return to its usual rhythm. The hum of diesel engines, the occasional hiss of air brakes, the steady drum of rain against the windshield. To anyone passing by, it looked like nothing had happened. Just another stormy night at a truck stop. But inside Victor's cab, the silence was suffocating. His hands still gripped the wheel, knuckles sore from tension. His body trembled with the memory of what he'd just seen. It wasn't the kind of thing you could unsee. He tried to rationalize it, the way men like him always did when faced with something they couldn't control. Maybe the guy wasn't dead. Maybe it was just a beating. Maybe they were carrying him somewhere to get him help. But no matter how many excuses he tried to conjure, the image replayed in his mind on a brutal loop. The limp body, the blood on his shirt, the cold precision of the men dragging him away. Victor shifted in his seat, finally letting out a long, shaky breath. His phone was still on the dash, the faint glow of the screen tempting him to press 3 simple numbers. He knew the right thing to do. Call it in, be the guy who saved a life, or at least made sure the victim wasn't left in a dumpster. But the other half of his mind screamed louder. What if they saw me? What if they checked the lot? See my plates, my company name. Victor drove for a Ukrainian-owned trucking outfit out of Chicago. His boss, a stern man named Oleg, had always made it clear. Drivers were to keep their heads down, deliver the load, don't get involved in local drama, don't bring the company trouble. Oleg had even said once over the phone with his thick accent, "Police don't help truckers. They only delay you. If something happens, you see nothing. Understand?" Victor had understood. At least he thought he had. But this wasn't just a bar fight in a parking lot. This was murder. The thought of going home weighed heavy on him now. He pictured Daniela standing by the stove, cooking feijão the way she'd been taught in Brazil, her soft voice humming while Jesse sat at the table coloring with broken crayons. He pictured David, headphones on, lost in whatever music teenagers used to drown out the world. How would he look them in the eye, knowing he'd seen a man killed and said nothing? He rubbed his temples, exhaustion and adrenaline battling inside him. He needed clarity, but clarity was hard to come by when every instinct told him he was in danger. A sudden bang on the far side of the lot made him jump. He turned his head, heart pounding, only to see another driver slamming his cab door, hustling across the wet pavement toward the convenience store. Victor forced himself to breathe. His nerves were shot, every sound magnified 100 times. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, he turned the key in the ignition. The Peterbilt rumbled to life, the vibrations steadying him in some small way. He couldn't stay here, not after what he'd seen. If those men came back and spotted him. He eased the truck into gear, careful not to rev the engine too loud. The flatbed rolled forward, tires hissing on wet asphalt. His headlights cut through the rain, sweeping across rows of parked rigs, briefly illuminating sleeping drivers who had no idea what had just unfolded 100 feet away. As he pulled toward the exit, he caught sight of the dumpsters again in his mirror. Dark, silent, no movement. It was almost as if nothing had ever happened there. The lot faded behind him, replaced by the empty stretch of I-70, black and gleaming with rain. Victor kept both hands on the wheel, eyes darting between the road and his mirrors. His mind refused to settle. Do I call 911 now? Pull into the next rest area? Wait until morning? He imagined the questions. Name, location, what did you see? And then the complications. Did they get your plate number? Did they see your face? His company would hear about it, no doubt. Maybe even law enforcement would pull him into court. Court meant exposure. Exposure meant risk. But then he thought of the man's body again, discarded like trash. What if that was me? What if that was someone's father, brother, son? He tightened his grip on the wheel. He knew, deep down, that silence was a choice too, and it was the kind of choice that could haunt a man forever. The rain intensified, wipers struggling to keep pace. Victor leaned forward, headlights cutting through sheets of water. Mile after mile ticked by, but the storm inside him refused to let up. Somewhere between St. Louis and the dark Midwest highway, Victor realized he wasn't just driving away from a truck stop. He was driving straight into a moral crossroads, and whichever way he turned, there would be no easy escape. Chapter 7. The call that could change everything. The wipers kept their rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. As Victor pushed the Peterbilt further east, the storm following close behind. His hands ached from clutching the wheel too tightly, but he couldn't let go. Every car that passed, every flicker of headlights in his mirrors made his chest tighten. He drove in silence for nearly an hour before the guilt became unbearable. His phone sat in the cup holder, screen dark, but it felt like it was glowing, calling to him. The temptation was there, heavy as the storm clouds above. 3 numbers, just 3, could change everything. Damn it, he muttered, voice cracking in the empty cab. Victor thought of Daniela again. She was the compass in his life. She'd always told him, "Victor, you don't run from responsibility. Not as a man, not as a husband, not as a father." He could almost hear her voice now, soft but firm, speaking straight to his conscience. He reached for the phone. His fingers trembled as he unlocked it. The glow lit his face, pale against the night. He opened the dial pad. His thumb hovered over the 9. That's when the CB radio crackled to life. Breaker, breaker. A man's voice cut through the static, rough and careless. Anyone else see that mess back at the TA lot? Victor froze. He wasn't alone in this. Someone else had seen. The radio popped again. Another voice joining in. You talking about that fight near the dumpsters? Yeah, I caught a glimpse. Ugly stuff. Best let the locals handle it, boys. Ain't our business. Victor's pulse raced. His hand hovered between the phone and the CB mic. He could speak up, share what he saw. Maybe the other drivers would back him. But as quickly as the thought came, it was crushed by the next transmission. Careful who's listening, though. A third voice warned, lower, heavier. Lot of ears out here tonight, some things you just don't repeat. The channel went silent after that. Victor's throat went dry. Who were these men? Random truckers gossiping? Or someone connected to what happened? The way the last voice said it, it didn't sound like advice. It sounded like a warning. He shut off the CB. The silence felt safer. His thumb still hovered over the 9 on his phone. He could call right now, report the body, give the police the exact truck stop and time. But what if those voices weren't just random? What if the men at the lot had radios too? If they knew he was on that channel, if they figured out who he was? The road ahead blurred with rain. He blinked hard, then wiped at his eyes. The fatigue, the adrenaline, the guilt, it was all crashing down on him. Finally, he forced himself to dial. 911. He pressed call. The line clicked, rang once, then silence. 911, what's your emergency? Victor's mouth opened, but no words came. His voice stuck in his throat. He stared at the dark road, knuckles white on the wheel. Hello? 911, can you hear me? The dispatcher repeated. Victor swallowed hard. He could end this torment right now. He could be the voice that gave a nameless victim justice. But before he could speak, headlights flared in his side mirror. Bright. Too bright. A black SUV pulled up alongside his flatbed, pacing him in the storm. Tinted windows. No plates visible through the rain. Victor's blood turned to ice. The dispatcher's voice came again, urgent now. Sir, if you need help, say something. We can trace this call. Victor's thumb hovered over the screen. The SUV lingered, window lowering just an inch. Enough for him to see a gloved hand resting on the door. He hung up. The line went dead. The SUV slowed, then slipped back into the dark, gone as suddenly as it appeared. But the message was clear. Victor gripped the wheel harder, sweat mixing with the rain dripping down his temple. He'd tried. He'd almost made the call. But now he knew someone was watching. Chapter 8. Hunted on the highway. Victor's heart pounded so hard he swore it was louder than the storm. The black SUV had vanished into the wet night, swallowed by the rain and fog, but its shadow lingered in his mind. He checked his mirrors every 10 seconds, his breathing shallow, each flash of headlights behind him making his chest tighten. The wipers kept fighting the sheets of rain, smearing the road lights into glowing streaks. His Peterbilt groaned under the weight of the flatbed load, tires hissing against the slick pavement. He knew the stretch of I-70 he was on, long, lonely, and dark at this hour. The kind of road where a man could disappear, where no one would see a thing until daylight. He reached for the CB, then stopped. If those voices earlier weren't just chatter, if they were connected to whoever was in that SUV, then using the radio again might light him up like a beacon. He shut it off completely. Safer that way. The phone sat on the dash, black screen like an accusing eye. He couldn't risk calling again. Not now. Not with someone clearly watching. Still, the memory of that dispatcher's voice burned in his ears. Sir, if you need help, say something. We can trace this call. He'd choked. He'd let fear win. His headlights caught the reflective signs up ahead. Rest area, 2 miles. Relief flickered inside him. If he pulled in, maybe there'd be other trucks, other people, safety in numbers. But then doubt crept in. What if it was a trap? What if whoever followed him knew he'd be desperate for a place to stop? What if they were already waiting? The wheel vibrated under his grip. He adjusted slightly, muscles in his arms stiff with tension. He hadn't felt this helpless in years, not since his early days on the road when he was still learning the loneliness of highway life. But this was different. This was survival. Behind him, headlights appeared, far back, but steady. He watched in the mirrors, breath held. The lights grew closer, gaining ground fast. His stomach twisted. It was them. It had to be. Victor downshifted slightly, the Peterbilt roaring as the RPMs climbed. The truck surged forward, rain hammering the windshield. He checked the speedometer, 70, 75, 80. Too fast for the wet road, but he couldn't slow down now. The headlights stayed with him, matching his pace. Victor's palms were slick with sweat. He wiped one hand on his jeans, then grabbed the wheel tighter. He could feel the trailer fishtail slightly on the slick pavement. One wrong move at this speed, and the Peterbilt would jackknife. "Come on, hold it together," he muttered through gritted teeth. The pursuing headlights drew closer, close enough now that he could make out the shape through the spray. It was the SUV. Same tinted windows, same shadowed presence. They weren't passing. They weren't backing off. They were just there, hunting him. Victor's mind raced. Options. Think. What are your options? The rest area sign appeared again, half a mile. He could pull in, hope for company, or he could keep going, risk the open road, maybe lose them in the storm. But then, a thought hit him like ice. What if the rest area was empty? He'd be cornered, alone. The SUV flashed its high beams, blinding him in his mirrors. He swore under his breath, blinking spots out of his vision. His truck swerved slightly, and he fought the wheel back under control. Then came the horn, long, deep, aggressive. The SUV pulled closer, almost kissing the back of his trailer. Too close. Way too close. Victor's gut clenched. Were they trying to run him off the road, or just scare him into stopping? The rest area exit loomed. Seconds to decide. He gritted his teeth and jerked the wheel, guiding the Peterbilt onto the ramp. Tires screamed against the wet pavement, the flatbed swaying dangerously. He fought to keep control, his whole body rigid. The SUV followed. Headlights cut through the rain as Victor pulled into the lot. His eyes darted, desperate for signs of life. Relief washed over him. 3 rigs idled under the orange glow of the rest area lamps. Company, witnesses, safety. He slowed just enough to guide his truck toward the far end of the lot, parking nose out in case he had to bolt. He killed his lights but kept the engine rumbling. In his mirror, the SUV rolled in slow. It didn't park. It just circled. Once, twice, like a wolf prowling the edge of a herd. Victor's pulse hammered in his temples. He reached for the glove box, pulled out the heavy mag light he kept for emergencies. His other hand hovered near his phone again. The SUV idled for a moment near the exit, headlights sweeping across his cab. Then, without warning, it accelerated hard, tires splashing water as it tore out of the lot and back onto the interstate. Victor sat frozen, chest heaving, the mag light heavy in his fist. The rain softened now, turning to a steady drizzle, but the silence left behind was worse than the storm. He'd escaped, for now, but deep down, he knew it wasn't over. Somebody wanted him silent, and they weren't done yet. Chapter 9. Whispers in the rest area. Victor killed the headlights but left the engine idling, the steady thrum of the Peterbilt vibrating through his seat. His fingers still clenched the mag light like a weapon, knuckles white. He forced himself to breathe slow, in and out, but his chest refused to loosen. The SUV was gone, or at least out of sight. The question clawed at him. Did they retreat, or are they still watching from the dark? He leaned forward, scanning the lot. 3 rigs sat parked under the orange sodium lights, engines humming. A tanker, a reefer, and an old cab-over that looked like it had been running since the 80s. Their drivers were nowhere to be seen, likely tucked in their bunks. He should have felt safer here, surrounded by his own kind, but instead he felt exposed. Victor flipped open the overhead compartment and pulled out the small, battered notebook, where he sometimes scribbled routes and expenses. Tonight, he needed it for something else. Keeping his mind sharp, he clicked a pen and started writing, hands still trembling. Black SUV, no plates. Followed me from mile marker 184. Tried to run me off I-70. Circled at rest area. He stopped, stared at the words. They looked insane on paper, like the ramblings of a paranoid trucker running on no sleep. He tore the page out, crumpled it, then stuffed it deep into the trash bag beside his seat. No record, no trail. But then again, what if he disappeared? What if no one ever heard from him again? That scrap of paper might have been the only clue. Victor rubbed his face, stubble scratching against his palms. He thought of Daniela. She'd be at home, probably putting Jesse to bed with a lullaby in Portuguese, maybe scolding David for staying up too late on his phone. The thought tightened his chest. He couldn't vanish. He had to get home. The rain had calmed, now just a mist on the windshield. He cracked the window to let the cool night air in. That's when he heard it. A sound. Faint. Crackling. Like static. He froze, listening hard. It wasn't the engine, it wasn't the rain. It was coming from the CB radio he'd shut off. The green light on the unit flickered once. Then again, Victor's blood ran cold. Slowly, he reached forward and turned the volume knob. The speaker hissed to life with faint static. For a moment, nothing else, then, "Breaker 19, anyone copy?" The voice was distorted, too low, almost a whisper. Not the casual chatter of truckers swapping road stories. No, this was deliberate. Victor didn't answer. His hand hovered over the mic, but instinct screamed not to. The voice came again. "Eastbound Peterbilt. Flatbed trailer. You can't hide forever." Victor's stomach dropped. They were talking about him. He snatched the knob and twisted, killing the unit completely. But even in the silence that followed, he swore he could still hear the whisper. Not in the radio, inside his head. The cab suddenly felt too small, too vulnerable. He grabbed the mag light and shoved it between the seat and the door within easy reach. Then he slid down in his seat, trying to calm his shaking hands. That's when he noticed movement. A figure faint in the mist walking between the parked trucks. Slow, deliberate. Victor's breath hitched. The man was tall, wearing a hooded jacket. He didn't seem like another driver. No reflective vest, no duffel, no urgency in his walk. Just a slow, steady pace, as if he was looking. The hooded figure stopped near the cab over, then turned his head toward Victor's Peterbilt. The lot was dim, but Victor swore those unseen eyes locked directly onto him. For a moment, neither moved. Victor's pulse thundered in his ears, then the figure raised his hand, not a wave, a gesture. 2 fingers pointed directly at him, and then he vanished between the trucks. Victor sat paralyzed, staring at the empty space. The lot was silent again, except for the low rumble of engines. He knew one thing for certain. The SUV might have driven away, but the hunt hadn't stopped. It had only gotten closer. Chapter 10. The Vanishing Convoy. Victor sat frozen in his seat, the figure's gesture still burning in his mind. 2 fingers, pointed directly at him. Not a warning, not a greeting, a claim. He scanned the parking lot again. The hooded man was gone. Only the orange glow of the lights and the faint hiss of rain remained. Victor tried to shake it off. "You're tired," he muttered to himself. "You're seeing things." But deep down he knew that wasn't true. He had been on the road long enough to recognize when exhaustion blurred reality. This wasn't that. The SUV, the CB whispers, the figure, too many coincidences. He forced himself upright and glanced toward the other rigs in the lot. Maybe he wasn't alone. Maybe another driver had seen something. The tanker sat with its hazard lights faintly blinking. The reefer's engine rumbled steadily, white mist spilling from its exhaust. The cab over, silent, windows dark. Victor hesitated. Truckers didn't usually appreciate strangers knocking on their doors in the dead of night, but right now his gut told him he needed to know who else was here. He grabbed his jacket, shoved the mag light into the pocket, and climbed down from the cab. His boots splashed into shallow puddles as he crossed the lot. The air felt wrong, thick, heavy. He started with the tanker. Its chrome surface reflected the hazy lights, but the cab windows were completely fogged. He tapped lightly on the door. "Hey, driver, you awake?" No answer. He knocked harder, waiting. Nothing. Victor frowned. Maybe the guy was out cold in the sleeper. He moved on. The reefer was next. Its engine buzzed, the steady thrum vibrating under his hand as he touched the door. He cupped his hands against the window, peering inside. Empty. The driver's seat was vacant. No bag, no logbook, no coffee cup. Just nothing. Victor stepped back, unease crawling up his spine. He circled to the back of the trailer. The refrigeration unit roared, blowing its cold breath into the night. He laid a hand on the steel door, locked tight. "Where the hell is everyone?" he whispered. Heart pounding, he moved to the cab over. The old truck looked like it had been sitting for years, rust lining the fenders. He pulled on the handle. It gave with a groan. The door swung open. Victor's maglite beam cut through the cab. Empty again. No bedding, no personal items, no smell of diesel and sweat that clung to every working truck. This wasn't a truck stop. It was a graveyard. He stumbled back, breath coming in quick bursts. All 3 rigs idling, lights on, engines running, but no drivers. No sign of life. The sound of his own breathing seemed too loud. He turned, scanning the shadows. That's when he noticed something new. All 3 trucks, tanker, reefer, cab over, had their CB antennas extended high, straight as needles. And as Victor listened, he realized the faint static he thought had vanished was still there. Not from his Peterbilt, from them. The three rigs whispered together in broken fragments, low pulses of static like a chorus of distorted voices. Victor staggered backward. His mind screamed to get inside his truck, to lock the doors, to drive. But before he could move, every single headlight in the lot flickered on at once, his Peterbilt included. The lot glared with blinding white light, swallowing him whole. Chapter 11. The Signal. Victor threw an arm across his face, shielding his eyes from the blinding headlights. The white glow seared through the storm, washing out the world. He stumbled, boots slipping in the rain-slick pavement. And then, silence. The engines that had been idling moments ago, cut off. The air compressors hissed once, then fell still. The lot was dead quiet. Victor lowered his arm. Every rig, including his Peterbilt, stood perfectly still. Their lights shone with unnatural brightness. No flicker, no dim, just steady beams like watchful eyes. Then came the sound. Not from the lot, not from a person, but from the CB mounted in his own truck. A burst of static cracked the silence. Victor, his heart slammed against his chest. The voice was faint, warped, as if dragged through miles of wire, but it was his name, clear, direct. "You've been chosen." Victor stumbled backward until his shoulder slammed against the cab-over's rusted fender. "What the hell?" he muttered, scanning the empty lot. The CB crackled again. "You are not lost. You are not forgotten. You are needed." He shook his head violently. No, this isn't real. Somebody's messing with me." But deep down, he knew the truth. No one had his CB channel. He had changed it hours ago. The tanker's headlights blinked once. The reefers followed. Then the cab-overs. In sequence, like signals. Victor's breathing quickened. He turned toward his own rig. Its headlights dimmed, then flared, synchronized with the others. Suddenly his Peterbilt's CB roared to life again, this time louder, clearer. "You drive farther than most. You see the roads others never will. You carry what they need. And tonight, you carry us." Victor froze. "What do you mean, carry you?" he demanded, his voice trembling. The silence stretched, so long he almost thought it was over. Then, softly, almost tenderly, "Look in your trailer." His gut twisted. He hadn't hauled a full load in days, just empty steel racks strapped down for a pickup in Texas. He hadn't opened that trailer since Ohio, and yet, something compelled him forward. Step by step, he crossed the blinding lot and reached the back of his flatbed. His hands shook as he unlocked the steel latch. Rain pattered against the metal. He pulled the door open. Inside, the trailer was no longer empty. Rows of CB radios sat neatly stacked, humming softly, each wired to a car battery. Their lights flickered in unison, green and orange, casting a sickly glow. Voices spilled out, not just one, but dozens layered on top of each other. Male, female, old, young. Some crying, some praying, some whispering words he couldn't understand. Victor staggered backward, his mind screaming to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. From the corner of his eye he caught movement. The hooded figure from before now stood at the edge of the lot, barely visible in the storm. Still, watching. Victor's mouth went dry. What is this?" The chorus of voices from the radios rose together, forming one sound, one sentence vibrating the very steel of the trailer. "You're not driving freight anymore. You're driving us." The lights of the lot flickered violently, every rig pulsing like a heartbeat. Victor spun, ready to run back to his cab, but the headlights of his Peterbilt cut off. The engine turned over on its own, rumbling to life. The door to the cab opened, by itself, waiting. Victor stood frozen, drenched in rain, torn between fleeing into the dark or climbing into a truck that no longer belonged to him. The CB hissed one final time, the voice whispering with chilling certainty. "The road ahead is ours now. Drive." The trailer doors slammed shut with a metallic clang, sealing the cargo of voices inside. And as Victor stared in horror, his Peterbilt rolled forward slowly, headlights cutting through the storm, without anyone in the driver's seat.
You've just witnessed the beginning of something far darker than a simple night on the road. If this story pulled you in, imagine what's waiting in the next one. Subscribe now and join us for more haunting journeys on the endless highways where not every driver makes it home.